I'm 12 years old and I'm your new pilot. When Lily Sullivan's voice cracked over the intercom, passengers thought someone was pranking them. Then the plane dropped 500 feet. Both pilots were unconscious. And the little girl in seat 9C just revealed a secret that could save, or kill, everyone. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories. Lily Sullivan sat in seat 9C of Southwest Flight 2749, her forehead pressed against the small oval window as the Arizona desert fell away beneath her. Phoenix Sky Harbor to Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. 3 hours and 40 minutes of flying time. Boeing 737-800, carrying 192 passengers plus 6 crew members. She'd checked all those details on the departure board before boarding, the way her father had taught her to always know exactly what aircraft she was flying on, even as a passenger. The flight attendant, Maria, according to her name tag, stopped at her row with a clipboard and a professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. You doing okay, sweetie? Need anything before we take off? I'm fine, thank you, ma'am. Maria consulted her paperwork, checking the seat number against the list in her hand. Unaccompanied minor, traveling to Seattle. Someone meeting you when you land? Yes, ma'am. My Aunt Rachel. Well, you just push that call button if you need anything at all during the flight, okay? Bathroom, snacks, water, anything. That's what we're here for. Lily nodded politely and turned back to the window, hoping the flight attendant would take the hint. She didn't want conversation. Didn't want the well-meaning questions and sympathetic looks that adults always gave when they discovered why a 12-year-old girl was flying alone across 3 states in the middle of November. The woman in seat 9B, elderly, probably in her 70s, with kind eyes and carefully styled silver hair, was already looking at Lily with that expression adults get when they see a child traveling solo. The mixture of concern and curiosity that made Lily's stomach tighten with anxiety. First time flying all by yourself, honey? The woman asked as the aircraft pushed back from the gate. No, ma'am. I've flown alone before. Oh, that's good. So you're a seasoned traveler then? The woman's smile was warm, trying to put her at ease. Going to visit family in Seattle? Lily's throat tightened. She could lie. She could say yes and leave it at that. But something about the woman's genuinely kind face made her tell the truth. My mother's funeral. The woman's expression crumpled immediately, her hand flying to her chest. Oh, sweetheart. Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. Oh, you poor thing. It's okay. The automatic response, even though it wasn't okay, would never be okay. But Lily had learned over the past few days that people needed you to say it was okay. They needed permission to stop feeling uncomfortable about your tragedy. She was sick for a long time. Cancer. She's not in pain anymore. Still, that's no age to lose your mother. You're what, 10? 11? 12? 12 years old. The woman shook her head, eyes glistening. Life isn't fair sometimes, is it? No, ma'am. It isn't. The woman reached over and patted Lily's hand gently, then mercifully settled back into her own seat and said nothing more. Lily was grateful. She turned back to the window and watched the ground crew directing the aircraft toward the taxiway, their orange vests bright in the morning sun. She was small for 12, everyone said so, though Lily hated when they pointed it out. Barely 4'9", maybe 85 pounds soaking wet, with her father's dark hair cut short and practical because long hair got in the way and annoyed her. She wore faded jeans, white sneakers that were getting too small but still had a few months of life left in them, and an oversized Air Force hoodie that had belonged to her father. The hoodie was navy blue with USAF stenciled across the chest and Sullivan across the back. It swallowed her small frame completely, the sleeves rolled up 3 times so her hands could actually reach through the cuffs. Even after 2 years, the hoodie still smelled faintly of her father's cologne, something woody and masculine that made her chest ache every time she caught the scent. She pulled it tighter around herself as the aircraft taxied toward the runway. The Boeing 737 climbed steadily into the clear November sky. Lily tracked their progress automatically, not even thinking about it, the change in engine pitch as they rotated, the landing gear retracting with a solid thunk she felt through the fuselage, the flaps coming up in stages as they gained altitude and speed. Her father had trained her to notice everything about aircraft, to be conscious of every phase of flight. 25,000 feet. 30,000. 35,000. The engines settled into their cruise pitch as they reached their assigned altitude. The captain's voice came over the intercom, smooth and professional with the practiced cadence of someone who'd made this announcement 10,000 times. Ladies and gentlemen, from the flight deck, we've reached our cruising altitude of 40,000 feet. Flight time to Seattle today will be approximately 3 hours and 35 minutes. We've got good weather all the way up the coast, so we're expecting a smooth ride. Flight attendants, you're free to begin cabin service. Lily closed her eyes and leaned her head against the window, feeling the slight vibration of the airframe through the plastic. 3 days. That's all she had to get through. The funeral was tomorrow at 2 o'clock at a cemetery in Bellevue where her mother had grown up. There would be a reception afterward at her aunt's house. Then Sunday she'd fly back to Phoenix, back to her Aunt Karen's house where she'd been living for the past 2 years. Back to the life she'd built after everything fell apart. 2 years and 3 months ago, she lost her father. Colonel Jake Raptor Sullivan, one of the most decorated test pilots in United States Air Force history, died when an experimental aircraft he was testing suffered a catastrophic failure at Mach 2.1 and 65,000 feet. The official investigation concluded it was a combination of factors: pilot error in judgment, equipment malfunction in the fly-by-wire system, and ultimately just bad luck. The kind of accident that happens when you push aircraft to the absolute edge of what's physically possible. But Lily knew the truth, even if the Accident Investigation Board didn't want to admit it. Her father didn't make mistakes. Jake Sullivan was incapable of pilot error. He was too good, too experienced, too careful. He'd flown aircraft that would have killed lesser pilots a dozen times over. He'd set speed records, altitude records, endurance records. He'd tested prototype fighters that existed only as classified programs with no official names. When you flew experimental aircraft that pushed the boundaries of physics and engineering, sometimes physics and engineering pushed back harder. Sometimes even the best pilot in the world couldn't overcome bad design or faulty components or systems that failed at exactly the wrong moment. Her father died doing what he loved, testing an aircraft that would make future fighters safer and more capable. The fact that it killed him didn't make him any less of a hero. It just made him dead. 3 days ago, 72 hours that felt both like yesterday and like a lifetime, Lily lost her mother. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, diagnosed 18 months ago, fought with chemotherapy and radiation and surgery and everything modern medicine could throw at it. For a while, it seemed like maybe her mother might beat it. Might be one of those miracle survivors you read about. But pancreatic cancer doesn't care about hope or miracles or 12-year-old girls who've already lost their fathers. It just keeps growing and spreading and taking until there's nothing left to take. Her mother died at home in Seattle, surrounded by family, with Lily holding her hand and trying to be brave even though she felt like her entire world was disintegrating. Now Lily Sullivan was an orphan at 12 years old, flying across 3 states to bury the last parent she had left, and after tomorrow she would be completely alone in the world except for aunts and uncles and cousins who loved her but who weren't her parents. She pulled the Air Force hoodie tighter and tried not to think about the fact that after tomorrow, there would be no one left who remembered her as anything other than that poor orphan girl. But there was something else. Something nobody on this flight knew. Something nobody was supposed to know, something that died with her father in the wreckage of an experimental fighter at 65,000 feet. For 6 years, from the time she was 6 years old until her father died when she was 10, Jake Sullivan had taught his daughter to fly. Not as a game. Not as pretend. Not as, maybe someday when you're older. Real flying. Real aircraft. Real skills. It started when she was 6 and her father noticed something unusual about her spatial awareness and hand-eye coordination. He'd been playing catch with her in the backyard when he realized she could track multiple objects simultaneously, predict trajectories with unusual accuracy, and process visual information faster than seemed normal for her age. He took her to a pediatric neurologist who ran tests and came back with results that made the doctor's eyebrows rise. Your daughter's spatial reasoning scores are in the 99.9th percentile, the doctor told her parents. Her ability to process multiple simultaneous inputs and maintain situational awareness is extraordinary. I've never seen scores like this in someone so young. What does that mean? Her mother had asked. It means, her father said quietly, that she has the cognitive profile of a natural pilot. The kind of brain that can fly aircraft. Her mother laughed, thinking he was joking. But Jake Sullivan wasn't joking. He started teaching Lily in simulators he built in their garage. Not toy simulators. Real flight training devices with accurate cockpit layouts, functioning instruments, and professional-grade flight dynamics software. He started with basic Cessna 172 simulators, simple single-engine trainers, and made her learn every system, every procedure, every emergency checklist. "Why are you teaching me all this?" she asked him when she was 7, frustrated after spending 2 hours practicing engine-out landings in the simulator. "Because you have a gift, Lily Bird." That's what he called her, Lily Bird, his little pilot. You have the kind of brain that comes along maybe once in 10,000 people. The kind of spatial awareness and hand-eye coordination that makes someone a truly exceptional pilot. And a gift like that shouldn't be wasted just because you're young. But I'm not allowed to fly yet. You have to be 16 to get a student pilot license. Not legally, her father agreed. But that doesn't mean you can't learn. By the time you're 16 and can fly legally, you'll have 10 years of training. You'll be the best damn pilot who ever walked into an Air Force Academy interview. You'll have skills that most professional pilots don't develop until they've been flying for 20 years. But isn't it illegal? Teaching you in simulators? No. Taking you up in actual aircraft before you're legally allowed? Yes, that would be very illegal. He smiled. Good thing we're not going to do anything illegal, right? But they did. Starting when Lily was 8, her father began taking her to small private airstrips in the desert outside Phoenix at dawn, before anyone else arrived. He had friends who owned aircraft and didn't ask too many questions. Cessna 172s, Piper Cherokees, Beechcraft Bonanzas. He put her in the pilot's seat with cushions so she could reach the pedals. He sat beside her and talked her through every procedure. And he let her fly. By age 9, Lily had logged 50 hours in actual aircraft. By age 10, she had over 200 hours, more than many people who held actual pilot's licenses. She flew cross-country flights. She practiced emergency procedures. She learned to land in crosswinds, deal with engine failures, navigate by instruments when visibility was poor. Her father kept detailed logs hidden in encrypted files on his personal computer. Someday, he told her, when you're old enough and have your legal certifications, I'll show the Air Force what you can do. I'll show them logs proving you've been training since you were 6. You'll be a legend before you even put on a uniform. He taught her military procedures too. Fighter tactics. Formation flying in the simulator. High-G maneuvers. He gave her access to training materials that were technically classified but that he had clearance for as a test pilot. You're going to be a fighter pilot, he told her when she was 9. Not just any fighter pilot. The best. You're going to break barriers, set records, test aircraft that haven't been invented yet. Just like your old man. Better than your old man. What if I don't want to be a fighter pilot, she asked once. Then you don't have to be. This is about giving you options, Lily Bird. If you want to be a commercial pilot, an astronaut, a test pilot like me, or if you want to do something completely different, that's your choice. I'm just making sure you have the skills. What you do with them is up to you. When he died, Lily was 10 years old with 200 actual flight hours and nearly 600 simulator hours. She had skills that would have been remarkable in an adult pilot, impossible in a child. And she promised herself she would never fly again. Flying was theirs, her and her father's secret world. The dawn flights where it was just the two of them and the aircraft and the clear desert sky. The hours in the garage simulator where he taught her to think 3 steps ahead, to always have a backup plan, to never panic no matter what went wrong. Without him, touching aircraft controls felt like betraying his memory. Like trying to have their special thing without him there to share it. She deleted all the simulator software from his computer. She destroyed the flight logs he'd kept. She took every memory of those 6 years and buried it as deep as she could, trying to forget that she'd ever been anything other than a normal kid. For 2 years, she succeeded. She was just Lily Sullivan, orphan, living with her aunt in Phoenix and going to middle school and trying to figure out how to be normal when your entire world had been torn apart. But at 40,000 feet over the Idaho wilderness, with 198 souls on board Southwest Flight 2749, all of that was about to change. The first sign something was wrong came 47 minutes into the flight. Lily was staring out the window, watching the landscape far below transition from desert browns to the greens and grays of Idaho forests, when she caught a smell that didn't belong. It was faint at first, a chemical odor, slightly sweet and acrid at the same time, mixed with something that reminded her of burning electronics. Most passengers wouldn't have noticed. It was subtle enough to dismiss as normal aircraft smell, the mixture of recycled air and cleaning products and jet fuel that permeates every commercial flight. But Lily's father had trained her to notice everything about aircraft. Your senses are diagnostic tools, he told her during one of their training sessions. Smell, sound, vibration, visual cues, they all tell you what the aircraft is doing and whether something's wrong. Most pilots ignore their senses. The best pilots trust them. That smell wasn't normal. It wasn't jet fuel. It wasn't hydraulic fluid. It was something in the cabin air itself, something being circulated through the environmental control system. Lily sat up straighter, suddenly alert. She looked around the cabin. Most passengers were reading, watching movies on their phones, dozing. Everything appeared normal. But that smell. She watched the flight attendants. Maria was at the forward galley, preparing the beverage cart. Richard, the male flight attendant she'd noticed earlier, was checking something on a tablet near the mid-cabin emergency exit. Both seemed fine. Then Maria paused, put a hand to her forehead, and swayed slightly. Just a momentary loss of balance, barely noticeable. She caught herself on the galley counter and continued what she was doing. Hypoxia, Lily thought immediately. Oxygen deprivation. But that didn't make sense. They were at 40,000 feet but the cabin was pressurized to the equivalent of about 8,000 feet, high enough that you might feel slightly tired but nowhere near high enough to cause hypoxia symptoms. The pressurization system was working, if it wasn't, the oxygen masks would have dropped automatically. Unless the problem wasn't lack of oxygen. Unless it was contaminated air. Lily's mind raced through the aircraft systems her father had made her memorize. The environmental control system on a 737 uses engine bleed air, compressed air tapped from the engines, to pressurize and cool the cabin. That air passes through air conditioning packs and mix manifolds before being distributed throughout the cabin. If there was contamination in the engine bleed air, combustion byproducts, hydraulic fluid, de-icing chemicals, carbon monoxide, it would circulate directly into the cabin. The pilots, sitting closest to the air supply source in the cockpit, would be exposed to the highest concentration. They'd be affected first and most severely. Maria stumbled. Actually stumbled, catching herself on a seat back. A passenger in first class asked if she was okay. Maria smiled and said something Lily couldn't hear from row 9, but her smile looked wrong. Too slow. Too confused. Ma'am. The elderly woman in 9B was looking at Lily with concern. Are you alright, honey? You look worried. Something's wrong, Lily said quietly. Wrong? What do you mean? The flight attendant. She's dizzy. Confused. Those are hypoxia symptoms. The woman blinked. How would you know? I need to check on her. Lily unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up. She was small enough that she didn't have to duck to avoid hitting her head on the overhead bins, small enough to slip through the narrow aisle easily even though the seatbelt sign was still illuminated. Honey, you should probably sit down, the woman said. The seatbelt sign is on. But Lily was already moving forward. She'd learned from her father that when something feels wrong on an aircraft, you don't wait and hope it goes away. You investigate immediately. Hesitation kills pilots. She reached Maria at row 5. The flight attendant was now sitting in a jump seat, her face pale and sheened with sweat. Her eyes had that unfocused look of someone who wasn't processing information correctly. Ma'am. Lily stopped directly in front of her, keeping her voice calm and clear. Are you feeling okay? Maria looked up slowly, like the simple act of focusing her eyes required enormous effort. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just a little dizzy. Must be coming down with something. Do you have a headache? Yes, actually. How did? Do you feel tired? Like it's hard to think clearly? Yes. Maria's brow furrowed in confusion. How are you? Who are you? My name's Lily. I need you to listen to me very carefully. You have hypoxia symptoms. Carbon monoxide poisoning, probably from contaminated bleed air. You need to get on oxygen right now. Richard appeared from the forward galley, concerned. Maria, what's wrong? You look terrible. She needs oxygen, Lily said firmly, looking up at Richard. And you need to check the cockpit immediately. If the cabin air is contaminated, the pilots have been breathing it at higher concentration than we have. They might be incapacitated. Both flight attendants stared at Lily like she was speaking a foreign language. She was 12 years old, barely 4.5 feet tall, swimming in an oversized Air Force hoodie. She looked like a child playing doctor, not someone diagnosing a potentially catastrophic emergency. Sweetheart, Richard said with the carefully patient tone adults use with children they think are overreacting, I appreciate your concern, but I don't think. The aircraft lurched. Not turbulence. Lily knew turbulence, the bounce and rattle of air currents, the momentary weightlessness of updrafts and downdrafts. This was different. This was the nose pitching forward violently, the aircraft dropping several hundred feet in seconds, passengers gasping and grabbing armrests, overhead bins rattling. Then the aircraft recovered, leveling out roughly, but the movement had been wrong. Sloppy. Uncoordinated. Like someone had accidentally pushed the yoke forward and then overcorrected. Richard's face went pale. He grabbed the interphone mounted on the bulkhead and punched the code for the cockpit. Captain Harrison, this is Richard. We have a situation in the cabin. Maria is showing signs of illness and we. He waited. No response. Captain. First officer. Nothing. Richard tried again, his voice higher now, tinged with panic. Flight deck, this is cabin crew, please respond. Silence. Oh my God, Richard whispered. His hand shook as he lowered the phone. They're unconscious, Lily said. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat, but her voice stayed steady. Training taking over, her father's lessons coming back after 2 years of trying to forget them. They've been on autopilot, but if they're slumped over the controls they're sending inputs to the flight computer. The autopilot will disconnect because it's detecting conflicting commands. We have maybe 90 seconds before this aircraft starts an uncontrolled descent. Richard stared at her. How do you possibly know? Because my father was Colonel Jake Sullivan. Lily met his eyes, saw her own fear reflected there but pushed it down. Call sign Raptor. He was a test pilot. He flew experimental aircraft for the Air Force. And he taught me about aircraft systems. He taught me a lot of things. You're 12 years old, Richard said weakly. I'm 12 years old and I'm telling you that both pilots are probably unconscious from hypoxia, and if we don't do something right now, everyone on this aircraft is going to die. Lily's voice cracked slightly on the last word, but she didn't look away. So you can either believe me or you can wait another 2 minutes and see if I'm right. But if I'm right and you wait, we're all dead. Maria groaned, slumping further in the jump seat. Richard looked at her, looked at Lily, and made a decision. Come with me, he said. They moved forward toward the cockpit. The aircraft lurched again, the nose dropping, the descent angle increasing. Passengers were starting to panic now, sensing that something was wrong, that the movements weren't normal turbulence. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm and stay in your seats, Richard called out, his voice admirably steady considering the circumstances. We're experiencing some technical difficulties and we need everyone to stay seated with your seatbelts fastened. The cockpit door was reinforced, locked, standard security protocol implemented after September 11. Richard pulled out his key card and swiped it through the reader, then punched in an emergency access code. The lock clicked, but when he tried to open the door, it only moved an inch before hitting something solid. It's blocked, Richard said. Someone inside is pressed against it. A male passenger from row 2, broad-shouldered, military haircut, probably ex-service by the way he carried himself, stood up without being asked. Let me help. Together, Richard and the passenger put their shoulders against the door and shoved. The door moved slowly, inch by inch, pushing against dead weight. Finally it opened wide enough for someone to squeeze through. The sight inside the cockpit made Richard inhale sharply. Both pilots were unconscious. Captain Harrison slumped forward in the left seat, his weight pressing against the yoke, forcing the aircraft's nose down. First Officer Davis hung sideways in the right seat, held in place only by her shoulder harness, her head lolled to one side. The instrument panel glowed with amber and red warning lights, altitude alerts, autopilot disconnect warnings, terrain proximity cautions. The altimeter read 37,400 feet and the number was decreasing. Descent rate showed 950 feet per minute and increasing. The airspeed was climbing into the yellow caution range as the aircraft picked up speed in the dive. Jesus Christ, the male passenger breathed. He was staring at the instrument panel with the recognition of someone who understood what he was seeing. We're in an uncommanded descent. Lily squeezed past them into the cockpit. She was small enough to fit in the cramped space easily. Help me get him off the controls. Now. What are you doing? Richard reached for her but she slipped past his hand. Saving this plane. Help me move him. Something in her voice, command that seemed impossible coming from a 12-year-old girl, made them obey. Richard and the passenger grabbed Captain Harrison under the arms and hauled him back in his seat, away from the yoke. The control column snapped back to neutral. The aircraft's nose came up slightly but they were still descending, still off course, the autopilot confused by conflicting inputs. Lily climbed into the right seat, First Officer Davis's seat. Her feet didn't reach the rudder pedals. The seat was positioned for an adult. She reached down frantically, found the seat adjustment lever, and yanked it. The seat slammed forward on its rails until her feet could barely touch the pedals. She'd have to point her toes to use them but it would work. Her hands found the controls. The yoke felt right in her grip, the same basic configuration as the Cessnas and Pipers she'd flown with her father. Larger aircraft, more systems, but the fundamental principles were the same. Her eyes scanned the instrument panel, taking in information the way her father had drilled into her. Altitude, 36,900 feet and dropping. Descent rate, 1,100 feet per minute. Airspeed, 425 knots and climbing, too fast. Heading, 318 degrees, they were off course. Autopilot, disconnected. Both engines, running normally, so this was definitely air contamination, not mechanical failure. "What are you doing?" Richard shouted. "You're a child. You can't." "I'm a pilot." Lily snapped, not taking her eyes off the instruments. "My father was Colonel Jake Sullivan, call sign Raptor. He was one of the best test pilots in Air Force history. And he trained me to fly from the time I was 6 years old. I have 600 hours in simulators and 200 hours in real aircraft. I know this plane. Now get out of my way and let me work." Richard's mouth opened and closed. The male passenger stared at her with wide eyes. "Is that true?" the passenger asked. "You really know how to fly?" "Yes." Lily's hands moved across the panel, checking systems. "I've never flown a 737 before, but I've trained on similar aircraft in simulators. The principles are the same. Right now I need you to get oxygen on both pilots. Portable bottles from the emergency equipment. They need pure oxygen to clear the carbon monoxide from their bloodstream." I don't." Richard was in shock. "Do it." Lily's voice cracked with the force of her shout. "Right now. Move." The command in her voice broke through Richard's paralysis. He stumbled to the emergency equipment locker and pulled out portable oxygen bottles. The male passenger helped him fit the masks over both unconscious pilots' faces, turning the flow to maximum. Lily's right hand found the radio control panel. Her left hand stayed on the yoke, feeling the aircraft through her fingertips the way her father had taught her. She took a breath, deep, steadying, the way he'd taught her to do before any critical procedure, and keyed the microphone. When she spoke, her voice was high, unmistakably that of a child, but it didn't shake. "Seattle Center, Southwest 2749, declaring emergency." There was a pause. 2 seconds. 3. Then, "Southwest 2749, Seattle Center, go ahead with your emergency." "Seattle Center, both pilots are unconscious due to hypoxia from contaminated cabin air." "I am." Lily swallowed. This was insane. They weren't going to believe her. But she had to try. "I am assuming control of the aircraft." A longer pause this time. She could imagine the controller staring at his radar scope in disbelief, trying to process what he'd just heard. "Southwest 2749, say again your last transmission." "Did you say both pilots are unconscious?" "That's affirmative, Seattle Center. Captain and first officer are both incapacitated. I'm a 12-year-old passenger but I have flight training. My father was Colonel Jake Sullivan, United States Air Force, call sign Raptor. He was a test pilot. He trained me to fly. I can control this aircraft." She could hear crosstalk in the background now, other controllers, supervisors, voices overlapping in confusion and disbelief. "Southwest 2749. The controller's voice was very careful now, like he was trying to talk someone down off a ledge. "Did you say you're 12 years old?" "Yes, sir. My name is Lily Sullivan." She paused, and when she spoke again her voice was stronger. "My call sign is Raptor. Just like my dad." More background noise. Someone was shouting about getting a supervisor. Someone else was saying something about FAA protocol. Then a new voice came on the line, older, deeper, with the unmistakable authority of military command. "Lily Sullivan, this is General Marcus Webb, United States Air Force, commander of Mountain Home Air Force Base in Idaho. We're monitoring your situation on military frequencies. Did you say your father was Jake Sullivan?" Lily's chest tightened. "Yes, sir. Colonel Jake Sullivan. He died 2 years ago in a crash testing an experimental aircraft at Edwards Air Force Base." "I know." General Webb's voice softened slightly. "I knew your father, Lily. I served with him. He was the finest pilot I've ever known. One of the best this country has ever produced. Did he really train you to fly? Yes, sir. Lily's hands moved automatically, making small corrections to keep the aircraft from deviating further off course. He started teaching me when I was 6 years old. He built flight simulators in our garage. He made me study systems, procedures, emergency checklists. When I was 8 he started taking me up in real aircraft, Cessnas, Pipers, Beechcraft. By the time he died I had logged 200 actual flight hours and almost 600 simulator hours. That sounds exactly like something Jake would do. A pause. Lily, I need you to understand the situation you're in. You're in command of a Boeing 737 with 198 souls on board, 192 passengers and 6 crew. You're at 36,000 feet and you need to land this aircraft safely. Do you really think you can do this? Lily looked at the instrument panel, at the unconscious pilots beside and behind her, at the Idaho wilderness stretching out 36,000 feet below. She was 12 years old. She weighed maybe 85 pounds. Her feet barely reached the rudder pedals. She'd never flown anything larger than a small jet before. But her father's voice was in her head, as clear as if he were sitting beside her in the right seat. When it matters, Lily Bird, when lives are on the line, you don't think about what you can't do. You think about what you've trained to do. Fear is normal. Fear keeps you sharp. But panic makes you stupid. So you feel the fear, you acknowledge it, and then you trust your training and you fly the damn plane. Yes sir, Lily said. Her voice was steady. I can do this. Then your father gave you one hell of a gift, and right now 198 people need that gift. General Webb's voice became more businesslike. We're scrambling F-15s from Mountain Home to escort you and provide visual confirmation. We're also patching in every experienced pilot we can find to talk you through procedures. First thing first, what's your current status? Lily scanned the instruments again. Altitude 35,800 feet, descent stabilized at 400 feet per minute. Airspeed 410 knots. Heading 318, approximately 15 degrees off course. Both engines operating normally. Fuel state shows 12,000 pounds remaining. No other system failures indicated. Outstanding situational awareness. That's your father's daughter right there. General Webb paused. Lily, we're going to help you through this step by step. You're not alone up there. Do you understand? Yes sir. Good. First priority is to stop that descent and stabilize your altitude. Can you do that? Lily's left hand was already on the yoke, her right reaching for the throttles. Already working on it, sir. Increasing power and adjusting pitch. She added thrust, both throttles forward slightly, feeling the engine spool up, hearing the pitch change. The nose wanted to drop with the additional power so she pulled back gently on the yoke, raising the nose, trading the kinetic energy of their descent for potential energy of altitude. The vertical speed indicator began to change. Minus 400 feet per minute, minus 200. Minus 50. Level, plus 100. Seattle Center, Raptor has arrested the descent. Climbing back to 36,000. Copy that, Raptor. Well done. That was a new voice now, a woman's voice, calm and professional. This is Captain Sarah Chen, United Airlines. I've been flying 737s for 22 years. I'm going to help talk you through this. First, let's get you stabilized and then we'll work on the approach and landing. Sound good? Yes ma'am. Thank you. You're doing great, sweetie. Your father would be incredibly proud right now. Now let's get you and everyone else home safely. For the next 44 minutes, Lily Sullivan flew Southwest Flight 2749 while the world held its collective breath. Within 15 minutes of her initial radio call, every major news network had picked up the story. Social media exploded. 12-year-old girl flying commercial jet after pilot's collapse. Daughter of legendary test pilot takes controls in emergency. Child pilot attempts impossible landing. In the cockpit, Lily blocked out everything except the voices on the radio and the instruments in front of her. Captain Chen walked her through engaging the autopilot, carefully, with specific instructions, because using autopilot wrong in this situation could be catastrophic. But once it was properly configured, the autopilot took over maintaining altitude and heading, giving Lily a moment to breathe. Okay, Raptor, you've got the autopilot holding 36,000 feet and heading 310, Captain Chen said. How are you feeling? Scared, Lily admitted. But okay. Focused. Good. Fear is healthy. It means you respect what you're doing. Now, how are your pilots doing? Richard, still in the cockpit doorway, checked both pilots. The first officer is starting to respond. She's moving a little bit, making sounds. That's excellent news. The oxygen is working. Keep those masks on them. They need to clear the carbon monoxide out of their systems. Captain Chen paused. Lily, I want you to understand something. We've got a lot of very experienced pilots working on this with you. We're analyzing weather at Seattle, runway conditions, approach procedures. We're going to set you up for the smoothest, easiest approach possible. You're not alone. I understand, ma'am. Have you ever practiced landings in a simulator? Yes, ma'am. My dad had a 737 simulator program. I've done probably 100 practice landings. 100 landings. Okay, that's good. That's really good. Most student pilots don't have that much practice before their first real landing. But I've never landed a real 737, Lily said quietly. The biggest thing I've actually landed was a citation jet. And that was 2 years ago. The principles are the same, just a bigger aircraft. You've got this. 2 F-15 fighters appeared on either side of the 737, close enough that Lily could see the pilots clearly through the canopy glass. The lead fighter, call sign Hawk, came on the frequency, Raptor, this is Hawk. Visual confirmation, I can see you in the cockpit. You have positive control of the aircraft. Altitude and heading are stable. Your father was a legend in the fighter community. He trained some of the best pilots in the Air Force. From where I'm sitting, looks like he trained you pretty damn well too. Thank you, Hawk. Lily's voice wavered slightly. You doing okay up there, kid? I'm scared. So am I, Hawk said. But you know what? You're doing everything right. You declared an emergency, you took control when the pilots went down, you stabilized the aircraft, and now you're working with us to bring everyone home. That's exactly what your dad would have done. Lily blinked back tears. He would have made it look easy. He would have been sweating bullets just like you are. He just never let anyone see it. That's what makes a great pilot, not being fearless, but being afraid and doing it anyway. Behind her, First Officer Davis groaned and her eyes fluttered open. She was disoriented, confused, trying to figure out why she was slumped sideways with an oxygen mask on her face. Hey, take it easy, Richard said gently. You were unconscious. Hypoxia from contaminated air. Davis's eyes focused slowly, tracking around the cockpit. She saw the instruments, saw the autopilot engaged, and then her gaze landed on Lily sitting in her seat. A 12-year-old girl, swimming in an oversized Air Force hoodie, hands on the controls of a 737. What, who are you? Lily glanced over. I'm Lily. I'm flying the plane right now. Just stay calm. You're going to be okay. You're a child. Yes, ma'am. I'm 12. But my dad was a test pilot and he trained me to fly. Everyone's okay. We're stable at 36,000 feet and we're working on getting down safely. Davis stared at her, trying to process this through the fog of hypoxia recovery. She looked at the instruments again, everything was stable, the aircraft was flying smoothly, the autopilot was engaged correctly. This is impossible. Yeah, Lily agreed. But it's happening. So I need you to either help me or stay quiet so I can focus. Can you do that? There was something in Lily's voice, a calm authority that seemed to transcend her age, that made Davis nod slowly. What do you need? When we get closer to Seattle, I'm going to need help with the approach checklist. I know the procedures, but you know this specific aircraft. I don't want to miss anything. You've never landed a 737? Never landed any commercial jet. Biggest thing I've ever actually landed was a Cessna Citation. That was when I was 10. Lily paused. In simulators I've landed 737s probably 100 times. But never for real. Never with 198 people depending on me. Davis continued staring at her, this tiny girl about to attempt something most professional pilots would consider nearly impossible. Your father must have been an incredible teacher. He was the best pilot who ever lived. Lily's voice caught. He died 2 years ago testing an experimental fighter. I'm flying to Seattle for my mom's funeral, she died 3 days ago from cancer. So I'm an orphan now. But before all that, before everything fell apart, my dad and I used to fly together. It was our special thing. Just his and mine. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. Me too. Lily blinked hard, forcing down the emotion. But I can't think about that right now. Right now I just need to land this plane and get everyone home safe. Davis reached over and squeezed Lily's shoulder gently. Then let's do that. Let's get everyone home. The approach into Seattle-Tacoma International Airport was choreographed like a military operation. Every controller in Seattle Center was involved. The FAA coordinated with military command. Air traffic in a 50-mile radius was rerouted. Emergency vehicles lined the runway, fire trucks, ambulances, rescue equipment. Captain Chen walked Lily through every step. Okay, Raptor, we're going to start your descent now. We want a nice gentle descent, nothing abrupt. I'm going to have you reduce your altitude to 30,000 feet first. Can you disengage the autopilot altitude hold? Yes, ma'am. Lily's hand found the correct button. Altitude hold disengaged. Good. Now gently, and I mean gently, reduce your throttles. Pull them back maybe half an inch. You want to start a descent of about 500 feet per minute. Lily's right hand moved the throttle levers back smoothly. The engine pitch decreased. The nose wanted to drop, so she trimmed slightly, keeping the attitude stable. The vertical speed indicator showed minus 450 feet per minute. Beautiful. That's perfect. Hold that descent rate. For the next 20 minutes, Lily descended in stages, 30,000 feet, then 25,000, then 20,000. Each step was carefully controlled, carefully monitored by a dozen experienced pilots listening on the frequency. At 15,000 feet, Davis began reading from the approach checklist. Altimeters set to 29.92, Lily confirmed, adjusting the barometric pressure setting. Landing gear. Lily's hand hesitated over the gear lever. Once she extended the landing gear, there was no going back. The aircraft would slow significantly, the handling characteristics would change. She'd be committed to landing. Trust your training, her father's voice said in her memory. Extending gear. She pulled the lever. 3 solid thumps reverberated through the airframe as the wheels locked down. 3 green lights illuminated on the panel. 3 green, gear down and locked. Good. Flaps 5. Lily moved the flap lever to the first setting. The nose pitched down as the flaps extended, increasing both lift and drag. She compensated with the trim wheel. At 10,000 feet, Hawk in the F-15 called, "Raptor, you're doing great. You're lined up perfectly for runway 16 right. Just keep doing exactly what you're doing. Thanks, Hawk. Your father is watching right now, you know that? From wherever pilots go when they die, he's watching and he's proud as hell. Lily's vision blurred. I hope so. At 5,000 feet, Seattle Tower took over communications. Southwest 2749, this is Seattle Tower. You're cleared to land runway 16 right. Wind is 180 at 7 knots. Emergency vehicles are standing by, but everyone here believes you're going to nail this landing. Cleared to land 16 right, Lily repeated, her voice steady despite her racing heart. At 3,000 feet, the city sprawled below them, buildings, highways, the distinctive shape of the Space Needle. Under different circumstances it might have been beautiful. Flaps 10, Davis said quietly. Flaps 10. Flaps 25. Flaps 25. The aircraft slowed further. Lily added a touch of power to maintain airspeed. The runway was visible now, 2 miles ahead, slightly to the right. She made a small correction with the rudder pedals, centering the approach. At 2,000 feet, Captain Chen said, "You're doing beautifully, Lily. Absolutely beautifully. Speed is perfect. Glide slope is perfect. Just keep it steady all the way down." "Yes, ma'am." At 1,000 feet, Lily keyed the radio, "Seattle Tower, Raptor is on final approach. 1 mile out." "Copy, Raptor. Cleared to land. Everyone is with you. Bring her home." 500 feet. The runway filled her vision now, gray asphalt marked with white lines and numbers. She could see the emergency vehicles lined up along the taxiways. She could see people standing outside the fire trucks, watching. 300 feet. "Start reducing power," Captain Chen coached. "Nice and smooth. You want to cross the threshold at about 135 knots. Lily eased the throttles back gradually. The engines quieted. The nose wanted to drop, she held it up with back pressure on the yoke. 200 feet. 100 feet. "Flaps full," Davis said softly. "Flaps full." The final notch of flaps extended. The aircraft ballooned slightly from the increased lift. Lily pushed forward gently, maintaining the glide path. 50 feet. The runway was rushing up now, close enough to see individual cracks in the pavement. Close enough to see the threshold markings. Close enough to. 20 feet. Lily began the flare, pulling back smoothly on the yoke, raising the nose, bleeding off speed, converting forward velocity into lift, waiting for the main wheels to kiss the pavement. 15 feet. 10 feet. The nose rising, the mains reaching down, the ground effect cushioning the aircraft in a bubble of compressed air. 5 feet. The main wheels touched. It wasn't perfect, there was a small bounce, a momentary skip, but then the wheels settled firmly on the runway. Lily immediately pushed forward on the yoke, planting the nose wheel, deployed the spoilers with her right hand to kill lift, and applied the brakes. The aircraft decelerated. The runway streamed past. The speed bled off, 100 knots, 80 knots, 60 knots, 40. They rolled to a stop on the centerline of runway 16 right, surrounded by emergency vehicles, but there was no fire, no disaster, no catastrophe. Just a 737 sitting peacefully on the runway with 198 souls safe inside. For a moment, a single perfect moment, there was only silence in the cockpit. Then the cabin behind them erupted. Passengers were crying, screaming, cheering, hugging each other. Some were sobbing with relief. Some were laughing hysterically. Some were praying. The sound of 192 people realizing they were alive filled the aircraft like a wave. Lily sat in the first officer's seat, her small hands still gripping the controls, and whispered, "I did it, Dad. I brought them home. Just like you taught me." Davis was crying openly, tears streaming down her face. She reached over and pulled Lily into a fierce hug. You saved us. You saved all of us. And that's when it hit Lily, what she'd just done, what she'd been holding together through sheer force of will and training. She was 12 years old. She was an orphan. She'd just landed a commercial jet with 198 people on board. She started sobbing, deep, wrenching sobs that shook her entire body. I want my dad, she gasped between sobs. I just want my dad. I want to tell him I did it. I want him to be proud. I want. He is proud, Davis said fiercely, holding Lily tight. Wherever he is, he's so proud of you right now. You just did something incredible. Something impossible. And you did it because of what he taught you. Outside the cockpit, emergency crews were surrounding the aircraft. Inside the cockpit, a 12-year-old girl who'd just saved 198 lives cried for the father who'd prepared her for a moment she never expected to face. Within 2 hours, Lily Sullivan's face was on every screen in the world. 12-year-old girl lands commercial jet after pilot's collapse. Daughter of legendary test pilot saves 198 lives in emergency landing. Hero child pilot, my dad taught me everything. But alongside the celebration came immediate controversy. Hot takes. Outrage. Think pieces about legality and ethics and child endangerment. Colonel Sullivan violated federal aviation regulations training minor child. Illegal flight training, hero or criminal? Should 12-year-old have been allowed to take controls? Dangerous precedent, when heroics violate the law. Aviation authorities launched investigations. The FAA issued statements. Legal experts debated whether what Jake Sullivan had done constituted child endangerment or genius preparation. The press conference was held that evening at the Seattle Airport Hilton. Lily sat at a long table flanked by General Webb, Captain Davis, First Officer Catherine Davis who'd recovered fully, and an FAA official whose name Lily didn't catch. She looked impossibly small in front of the forest of cameras and microphones. She was still wearing her father's Air Force hoodie. Her eyes had dark circles under them. She looked exhausted and young and impossibly brave. A reporter from CNN raised his hand. Lily, there are already people saying your father acted recklessly. That he violated federal law by teaching you to fly. That he endangered you and created a situation where you were forced to take on responsibilities no child should ever have. How do you respond to those criticisms? Lily was quiet for a long moment, staring at the microphone in front of her. Then she leaned forward, and when she spoke her voice was clear and steady and absolutely certain. My father saw that I had a gift. A rare gift, exceptional spatial awareness, hand-eye coordination, the ability to process multiple systems simultaneously while staying calm under pressure. Those aren't things you can teach. Those are things you're born with. But what you do with those natural talents, that's what matters. My father could have ignored my gift because I was young. He could have said, wait until you're 16 and can get a student pilot license legally. But he didn't. He nurtured my talent. He taught me. He trained me with the same intensity and dedication that the Air Force uses to train its pilots. Was it against regulations? Yes. Did he break federal aviation laws? Absolutely. But would you rather those 198 people on Flight 2749 died today because my father followed the rules? Or are you glad they're alive, glad they're going home to their families tonight, because my father believed I could learn and train me anyway? The room was silent. People keep asking if my father was wrong to teach me, Lily continued, her voice gaining strength. I think you should ask the passengers. Ask the 6-year-old boy in seat 12D who's going home to his family tonight. Ask the pregnant woman in seat 23F who's going to have her baby in 3 months because I knew how to land that plane. Ask Captain Harrison and First Officer Davis who are alive because my father taught me emergency procedures. Ask all 198 people whose lives were saved today. Ask them if my father was wrong. Another reporter, but don't you think there's a difference between having skills and being forced to use them in such a traumatic situation? I wasn't forced, Lily said firmly. I made a choice. When I realized both pilots were unconscious, I had two options: sit in my seat and hope someone else could help, or use the skills my father gave me to try to save everyone. I chose to try. And yes, it was terrifying. Yes, it was traumatic. But you know what would have been worse? Sitting there doing nothing while 198 people died because I was too scared to act. A third reporter: Lily, you've lost both your parents in the past 2 years. Your father 2 years ago, your mother just days ago. Now you're the center of this national controversy. How are you coping with all of this? Lily's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away from the cameras. I miss my parents every single day. My dad was my hero, the strongest, smartest, bravest person I've ever known. He was the best pilot who ever lived and the best teacher. My mom was the kindest, most loving person in the world. She fought cancer for 2 years and never once complained. Losing them both, it's the hardest thing I've ever experienced. But my father taught me something important. He taught me that life isn't fair. That sometimes terrible things happen to good people. That sometimes you lose the people you love most. But he also taught me that when those moments come, when life throws you into an impossible situation, you don't quit. You don't give up. You trust your training, you do your best, and you keep fighting. Today, 198 people's lives were in my hands. And even though I'm 12 and I'm grieving and I'm terrified, I didn't quit. I used what my father taught me. I flew that plane. I landed it safely. And because I did, 198 people are alive tonight. She paused, wiping her eyes. My father used to tell me, Lily Bird, age doesn't define ability. Training defines ability. Courage defines ability. I'm 12 years old and I just landed a Boeing 737 with 198 people on board. Not because I'm special. Not because I'm magic. But because my father saw my potential and trained me, even when the law said he shouldn't. Call sign Raptor didn't die 2 years ago when my father's plane crashed. It just got passed down to me. And today, Raptor saved lives, just like my dad always did. The room erupted in applause. Reporters who'd been ready to ask critical questions found themselves clapping. General Webb had tears streaming down his face. First Officer Davis was openly sobbing. One more thing, Lily said when the applause finally died down. Tomorrow I'm going to my mother's funeral. I'm going to say goodbye to the last parent I had. Then I'm going back to Phoenix to finish 7th grade. I'm going to be a normal kid as much as I can be. I'm going to heal and grow and figure out who I am without my parents. But when I turn 18, I'm going to the Air Force Academy. I'm going to become a pilot, a legal pilot with all the proper certifications. I'm going to do it the right way, by the book, with official training. And when I do, I'll remember that everything I am, everything I can do, started with a father who loved me enough to break rules to prepare me for a moment he never expected would come. My father gave me a gift. Not just the ability to fly. But the belief that I could do anything if I worked hard enough, trained hard enough, and never gave up. Today, that gift saved 198 lives. She stood up from the table, tiny, exhausted, impossibly brave, and walked away from the press conference. The cameras followed her every step, but she didn't look back. Behind her, General Webb approached the microphone. I served with Jake Sullivan for 15 years, he said, his voice thick with emotion. He was the finest pilot I ever knew. And today, his daughter proved that his legacy, his belief in training, in preparation, in nurturing exceptional talent, that legacy saves lives. Whatever legal questions exist about how she was trained, there's no question about the result. 198 people are alive because Jake Sullivan prepared his daughter for the impossible. That's a legacy worth celebrating. More applause. And slowly, the narrative began to shift. Not everyone agreed, there would be legal investigations, ethical debates, arguments about regulations versus results. But the overwhelming response was gratitude. Wonder. Recognition that sometimes miracles look like a 12-year-old girl in her father's Air Force hoodie, flying a plane she was never supposed to know how to fly. 6 months later. Lily stood at a podium in the auditorium of the United States Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. The room was packed with cadets, young men and women training to become Air Force officers, many of them aspiring pilots. She was 13 now, her hair slightly longer, her face more mature but still young. She'd grown an inch and filled out a little, no longer quite as tiny as she'd been. She wore neat clothes, dark pants, a white blouse, and a blue blazer. But pinned to her lapel was a small silver pin, a set of pilot's wings. A gift from General Webb, who sat in the front row watching with tears already forming in his eyes. "Good afternoon," Lily began. "I'm Lily Sullivan. Call sign Raptor. I'm 13 years old. Still too young to drive a car. Still 5 years away from being able to enlist in the military. But I have 200 actual flight hours and I've landed a commercial jet with 198 souls on board in an emergency that should have killed everyone. I'm here today not to brag. Not to be famous. But to talk about legacy, talent, training, and the question that's divided this country for the past 6 months, was my father right or wrong to teach me to fly? I can't answer that question for everyone. Legal experts will debate it. Ethicists will argue about it. The FAA is still investigating. There may be laws changed because of what happened. And that's okay. Society needs rules. Aviation needs regulations. Safety is paramount. But I can tell you what I know. My father, Colonel Jake Sullivan, was one of the finest test pilots this country has ever produced. He flew aircraft that would have killed lesser pilots. He set records. He tested technologies that advanced aviation by decades. He saved lives through his work, his courage, his willingness to push boundaries. When I was 6, my father noticed I had unusual abilities, spatial awareness, hand-eye coordination, the ability to process complex systems simultaneously. A pediatric neurologist tested me and said my cognitive profile was exceptional for piloting aircraft. It's not something you can teach, it's something you're born with. My father made a choice. He could wait until I was 16 and could legally train as a pilot. He could let those natural talents sit dormant for a decade. Or he could begin training me immediately, intensively, professionally, the way military pilots are trained, but secretly, because I was too young for it to be legal. He chose to train me. Starting when I was 6, he built flight simulators in our garage. Real simulators with accurate instruments and professional software. He taught me aerodynamics, weather, navigation, systems, emergency procedures. When I was 8, he started taking me to small private airstrips and letting me fly real aircraft, always secret, always illegal, always with him right beside me. By the time my father died when I was 10, I had 600 simulator hours and 200 actual flight hours. I could fly better than many adults with pilot's licenses. I had skills that most professional pilots don't develop until they've been flying for 20 years. Was it illegal? Absolutely. Was it against every regulation? Yes. Would any official aviation authority have approved? Never. But on November 15th of last year, those illegal skills saved 198 lives. She paused, looking out at the cadets. I'm not saying every child should learn to fly. I'm not saying rules don't matter. I'm not saying my case should be used to justify ignoring aviation law. What I'm saying is this: talent is rare. Exceptional talent is even rarer. And when someone, regardless of age, has genuine, measurable, exceptional ability, maybe we should think very carefully before we waste it just because that person doesn't fit our expectations. My father saw my potential and he refused to waste it. He trained me with intensity and dedication. He pushed me. He made me practice until procedures became reflexes. He taught me to stay calm under pressure, to trust my training, to never panic no matter what went wrong. I didn't ask to be in that cockpit. I didn't want that responsibility. I wanted to be a normal 12-year-old girl flying to her mother's funeral. But when both pilots collapsed and everyone on that aircraft was going to die, I had a choice: use what my father taught me, or let everyone die. I chose to act. And yes, it was traumatic. Yes, it gave me nightmares. Yes, I've been in therapy since it happened. But you know what? I'd make the same choice again. Because 198 people went home to their families that night. And that matters more than my trauma, more than legality, more than comfort. People ask me if I'm angry at my father for training me. For putting me in a position where I might have to use those skills. The answer is no. I'm grateful. Because when the moment came, when it really mattered, I was ready. I had the skills to save lives. And isn't that what we should want? Shouldn't we want people to be prepared for the moments when they can make a difference? A cadet raised her hand. Lily paused. Yes. Do you think what your father did should be legal? Should other parents be allowed to train young children as pilots? Lily thought carefully. I think there's a difference between what my father did and what most parents would do. My father was a professional test pilot with decades of experience. He knew how to train pilots, that was part of his job. He had access to professional equipment and training materials. And most importantly, he accurately assessed that I had exceptional natural ability before he began training. Would I support a random parent with no aviation experience trying to teach their 5-year-old to fly? No. That would be dangerous and irresponsible. But should there be pathways for exceptionally gifted young people to begin serious training earlier than current regulations allow, under professional supervision with proper safeguards? Maybe. That's a conversation worth having. What I don't want is for my case to be used to justify keeping talent in a box because of age. Age correlates with maturity and judgment, but it doesn't define ability. Some 12-year-olds are more capable than some adults. Some 16-year-olds are more mature than some 30-year-olds. We should evaluate people as individuals, not just as members of an age group. Another hand. What are your plans now? Finish 8th grade. Then high school. I'm going to be a normal teenager as much as I can be, friends, school, maybe some hobbies. But I'm also going to keep studying. I'm going to take physics and engineering classes. I'm going to learn everything I can about aviation, aerospace, aircraft systems. And when I turn 18, I'm coming here, to this academy. I'm going to become a pilot the legal, official way. I'm going to earn my wings through proper channels. And when I do, when I'm wearing this uniform and flying Air Force aircraft, I'll remember that my foundation, everything I know, everything I can do, started with a father who believed in me when no one else would have. Who saw potential and refused to waste it. Who prepared me for a moment he never expected would come. Call sign Raptor was my father's. Colonel Jake Sullivan, test pilot, legend. He died pushing boundaries, testing aircraft that advanced aviation. That's who he was, someone who pushed boundaries in aircraft and in training. Now Raptor is my call sign. I carry his legacy. And when I'm a pilot, when I'm training the next generation, I'll remember what he taught me. Heroes come in all sizes, all ages. Talent doesn't wait for permission. And sometimes the most important thing you can do is believe in someone when everyone else says you're wrong to believe. She gripped the podium, her voice gaining power. My father broke rules to train me. And those broken rules saved 198 lives. If that's his legacy, preparing his daughter to save lives when it mattered most, then that's a legacy I'm proud to carry. The auditorium erupted. Cadets rose to their feet, applauding. Officers in the audience stood and saluted. General Webb was openly weeping. And somewhere, Lily knew, her father was watching. Proud. So proud. Not because she was famous. Not because she was on television. But because when the moment came, when lives were on the line, she'd trusted her training. She'd stayed calm. She'd flown the aircraft. She'd saved lives. Just like Raptor always did. Epilogue. 5 years later. Lily Sullivan walked across the tarmac at the Air Force Academy flight training facility. 18 years old now, no longer tiny but still small, 5'2", maybe 110 pounds. But she stood straight and confident in her flight suit, the same flight suit her father had worn 25 years earlier. On the name patch, stitched in black thread, Raptor. Her flight instructor, Colonel David Martinez, a fighter pilot with 28 years of experience, waited beside a T-6 Texan II trainer. He'd flown with her father years ago, had known Jake Sullivan well. "Ready for your first official flight as an academy cadet?" he asked. "Yes, sir." Lily's voice was steady. "Your father talked about you constantly, you know. Before he died. He'd show me videos of you flying in simulators, pictures of you in Cessnas. He was so proud of you. Said you were going to be better than him. I don't know if I'll ever be that good, sir." "You already are." Colonel Martinez handed her the flight suit. This was his. General Webb kept it. He wanted you to have it when you got here. Lily took the suit with shaking hands. Her father's flight suit. The one he'd worn on test flights. The one he'd worn the day he died. She pressed it against her chest, feeling his presence as strongly as if he were standing beside her. "Your call sign was always meant to be yours," Colonel Martinez said quietly. "Your father told me that. He said he was just keeping it warm until you were old enough to claim it officially." Lily couldn't speak. She just nodded, tears streaming down her face. "He'd be so proud of you, Lily. What you did 5 years ago, saving those people, and what you've done since. Finishing school, coming here, earning this the right way. You honor his memory every day. I miss him so much. I know. But he's here. Every time you fly, he's with you. Teaching you, guiding you, cheering you on." Lily pulled on the flight suit. It fit better than the oversized hoodie she'd worn as a 12-year-old. She zipped it up, feeling her father's legacy settle around her shoulders like a mantle. They walked to the T-6 together. Lily climbed into the cockpit, ran through her pre-flight checks with practiced ease. The controls felt right in her hands. The aircraft spoke to her in the language her father had taught her. When she taxied to the runway, when she advanced the throttle and felt the aircraft accelerate, when she rotated and lifted into the clear Colorado sky, she wasn't alone. Her father was there. In every procedure she'd memorized. In every skill she'd practiced. In every moment of training he'd given her. "This one's for you, Dad," she whispered as she climbed through 5,000 feet. "I made it. Just like you knew I would. I'm Raptor now. Officially. Legally. And I'm going to make you proud." The T-6 climbed higher, sunlight glinting off its wings. And Lily Sullivan, call sign Raptor, daughter of Colonel Jake Sullivan, the girl who landed a 737 at 12 years old, became exactly what her father always knew she would be. A pilot. Not just any pilot. One of the best. Because that's what Raptors do. They push boundaries. They save lives. They fly. And they never, ever quit.